In order for the City Council special meeting on November 10th. And this is for the interview of potential city managers. So at this time, I'll introduce myself, Terry Furlong. I'm the mayor of North St. Paul. I hope you had a nice little tour of the town today and met some of the personnel. And I was on the council for 10 years and then ran for mayor this past election. So I'm 3 years into it at this time right now. So I'll pass it, well, we'll go right to the right here and then end up with Tim. They'll introduce themselves and then kind of give you a platform how we're going to go about doing this. But go ahead, Lisa Wang.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lisa Wong. I am a council member as of January this year, so I am pretty new to the council.
Hi, welcome. I'm Candy Peterson, and I'm in my third term.
And her microphone works.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Scott Thorson. I'm on my second term.
Great.
I'm Tim Cole, and as Lisa said, Lisa and I are the two newbies. I started in January as well.
Welcome, John. If you want to maybe say a few words. So the protocol is we're going to ask you 19 questions. We're each going to ask you, we're just going to kind of go around and ask each question. And then you'll have time to answer each question. I don't think there's a time limit for each question, so just take your time, be comfortable. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is John Stark. I'm happy to be here. I'm very grateful that you kind of made an exception for me to come in a week early. So I'm appreciative of that. I'm not kind of a prima donna that would expect you to make allowances for me, so I do appreciate that. I'm currently the Community Development Director for the City of Richfield. I've been doing that particular job for 14 or 15 years. 3 years ago, our city manager retired, and the other department directors had implored me to run for, or to be a candidate for the city manager position, and that was something I was really proud that they had asked me to do, and I hadn't thought necessarily about being a city manager before that point in time. Since that point in time, I have been looking at that. I've joined the Minnesota City Managers Association and doing the training that I can. It's more difficult during COVID, of course, to do a lot of those kinds of things, but I've been trying to prepare myself to the greatest degree possible to be a city manager. And so thank you for having me.
Good. Again, welcome, and I'll start out the question. First question is, please tell us what interests you about this position and highlight key qualifications that make you the best person for this job.
Yeah, I think I'll start with the second part first. What qualifies me for this job? I think it's a couple of things. One is throughout my career, I've managed, among other things, I've managed redevelopment projects, some of which are very large. The largest redevelopment project I've managed is called the Cedar Point area, and it's got about 700 housing units. It's got 4 or 5 large commercial developments. It's got a new park that was a part of it, a new parkway road. I worked with every single city department in managing that process. And when you start to think about that scale, it really is kind of the scale of a small city. And so I in that way, I do believe I've, in a very smaller scale, had kind of that overall experience in managing a process in a community. The other thing is when I look at your comprehensive plan, when I go through all of the 8 goals, they are all 8 things that I've spent a lot of my career working on. And there are probably 3 or 4 of them that, I'm in a position now where I have to kind of sell myself. It's not necessarily my nature to be self-promotional, but I would say that there are probably 3 or 4 of the things in here that I'm one of the metro-wide leaders in. And so I think that what I bring to you in terms of the goals you're trying to achieve works well in a lot of ways. There's certainly a lot of things that I don't have experience in, but you have a great team. I obviously have no experience in managing law enforcement or in managing public works in that way, but you've got a great team that is able to do that. My job would be to really put all that together and to help them put it together and help you put it together. And I think that's my attribute is really being a team member, a team leader, and bringing folks together for a solution and a path forward. What interests me about North St. Paul, I've been here before, obviously, but just this past Sunday, my wife and I came and spent about 4 hours driving the streets, getting out and walking. It's just a lovely community. It's precisely the kind of community that I would want to live in, and therefore the kind of community I would want to work in.
Thank you. Councilmember Wong.
Thank you, John. I'm on question 2. So can you please describe your leadership and management style?
Yeah, so my leadership style, first of all, there's a saying about born leader. I don't believe in that. I don't believe there's such a thing as a born leader. I think leadership skills are something you can learn. We all have certain attributes that might make us a more effective leader in one way or another, but we are all born leaders. And so I would look to my staff, I would look to you to be shared leaders. If there was a new city employee that's on their first week, they may know more about social media than any of the 55 employees that are here. So I would say that employee is a leader in that way. So I believe in shared leadership in that respect. Obviously, as the city manager, you would have to take on a greater leadership mantle. And my leadership style, I think, is building up those around me. And the way I think about it, if you think about, we've all seen cheerleading squads where they do the pyramid, where they build the pyramid. And there's always one person that's kind of in the back, making sure people are in the right place, making sure nobody falls. And that's the kind of leader I am, is the kind of person that's playing that role.
Councilmember Peterson.
Describe how you would build trust with the city council and staff.
Well, trust is hard because it takes time. It's about shared experiences, and once we've had shared experiences together, then we see as a team how we contribute. Unfortunately, some of that gets condensed when it's a heated issue or when it's something the community is upset about. And so there will be times when we're going to have to develop trust more quickly. But I don't know a better answer to tell you other than time. And I hope that you would see my integrity. I mentioned this to the staff. When I wrote you my cover letter, you might look at the bottom and see me talking about integrity. I do believe integrity, personal and professional integrity, is the basis of all good public decision-making. I did not know the circumstances under which the former city manager had left when I wrote that. And I don't want to assign any, I don't know the situation well. I know what I've read. But that is my number one thing that I would want to come in and establish with people, that I'm a person of integrity.
Councilmember Thorson.
Please describe your involvement in the budgeting and financial process of your current organization, as well as your experience with long-range financial planning.
Yeah, so in addition to being the Community Development Director, I'm the Executive Director of our Housing and Redevelopment Authority and Economic Development Authority. And, as is the case with North St. Paul, legally, those are completely distinct operations from the city. As the Executive Director, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of those bodies. The grand total budgets that I'm in charge of between the HRA, the EDA, and my role with the city is about $6 million. So every year I'm budgeting a $6 million budget. But in addition to that, one of my specialties that just as time has gone by that I've developed for 30 years now is public finance, particularly things like tax increment financing or bonding, or even a lot of the public works kinds of things like assessing for roads. People in the organization come to me for help with dealing with public finance issues. Certainly, we have a finance director. Quite frankly, and actually they just left, but they would tell you that I know more about tax increment financing than they do. I know more about a few other things than they do. There are a long list of things that, about public financing that they know more than I do, of course. But I do believe public finance is one of my strengths.
Councilmember Cole.
What's the most creative initiative or project you completed in your current or last job?
That's a good question. Creative. Well, I would say, and this has been some time ago, in Richfield, we, like North St. Paul, our school district and our city are kind of contiguous. It's the same borders. And we had spoken with our school district about what their needs were, and we found kind of some overlapping needs. They were finding that their students that performed the poorest were students that were constantly moving around, and that typically those were students with in rental housing with lower incomes. So we talked to them about their need. We also found that a lot of the concerns that they had overlap with ours. So we created a program called Kids at Home, which is a shallow rent subsidy. In Richfield, we have our own Section 8 housing voucher program. So it's very different than that, but it's a shallow rent subsidy for a 4-year program that a family goes, it's almost like college. It's a 4-year that you graduate from. You've got to participate in parent share resources. So by providing this subsidy for rent, they were able to maintain residency in one place. And so as students, the students were doing better. As members of our community, they were more engaged and more a part of the community. And when that first came about, that was something that I had brought to the group as an idea.
I was going to say, if I take a drink of water, I'll start the next round here in a second. Okay, John. Describe a time when you made a mistake at work. How did you deal with this situation, and what was the outcome?
Yeah, well, I can tell you about a mistake I made with the city council. This has been some time ago now. It's probably 2004 or 5. We had a development that is unusual in that most of the redevelopments we did were what's called pay-as-you-go tax increment financing, where the city or HRA really didn't advance any money. The developer advanced all the money, and the tax increment then ultimately paid them back for their investments. This one project was a little different. The numbers could never work out, and the HRA did put some more money into that, both the city and the HRA. When the recession hit, it hit this development hard, had a lot of commercial space in it that was not being filled. And so I was in constant communication with the developer. How is the project doing? It was clear that they were having problems, and they were constantly reassuring me, we're going to figure this out, we're going to figure this out. And so I held that information. I didn't share that information with our city council. Maybe I was naive. I was trusting of the developer that they had this under control, that they were figuring it out. Ultimately, I did have to come to our city council and share with them that the project had gone into bankruptcy, and that it was a good possibility that the mortgage we had on the property was not going to get paid. That was a very difficult conversation for me to have with our city council. And from that time on, I talked a little bit about integrity, and I looked at my actions, that was, dishonesty on my part. Honesty is not only about telling the truth, it's about telling the whole truth, obviously. And withholding information is just as dishonest as not sharing the truthful information. And so I endeavored to always make sure that the HRA, the EDA, the city council was never surprised in that way from me again. That's one of my goals with a city council, with policymakers. I never would want you to be surprised. I have something I call planting seeds. I like to bring you in incrementally when something's happening. There's that saying, you're talking to somebody and they say, well, this is the first I ever heard of that. Well, it's always going to be the first you've heard of something. Anytime somebody tells you something by its nature, it's going to be the first time you ever heard it. What they really mean to say is, I can't believe this is as far along as it is, and I'm just now hearing about it. And I never would want a city council to respond that way to me, and I do everything I can to make sure that that's not the case.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wong.
I'm on question 7. Do you consider yourself to be a proactive person? And can you provide an example of a time when you were proactive in solving a small problem before it turned into a major problem?
Yeah, so my educational background is in urban planning. And by that nature, I'm a proactive person. I chose that degree, I chose that livelihood because it fit my personality. And I believe that planning always has to be an ongoing thing and always has to be a living thing. I know you just finished your comprehensive plan. That can't just sit on a shelf somewhere. It's got to be a living document that is revisited. I know that in 2017, you did a strategic plan. It's going to be time to revisit that soon. I think with a new city manager, whether it's me or somebody else, you'll want them to probably be in place at least a year before you start tackling that. But the strategic plan will be happening. And then you've got your downtown revitalization plan. It's probably, another 2 or 3 years, it'll be time to look at that. And it's just an ongoing cycle. There should always be some kind of planning going on, and there should always be implementation of those plans going on. In terms of a proactive solution, give me a second. With any of our development project, well, here's my best example, actually. Right now we're in a development boom. Richfield has seen as much or more development as anybody. I don't necessarily take credit for the development that's happening right now. What I would take credit for is during the recession and when the housing bubble burst, that we took the time to prepare. I told my staff, this will come back, this will turn around, and we need to make sure we're prepared for when the housing market comes back. One of the things I feel really strongly about is being self-aware. So we said, as an organization, let's be self-aware about what we're good at, what we're not good at, and what came out of that. Some communities have what they call like recruitment and retention. We had that as well. But when we really took a look in the mirror and said, what are we good at, what are we bad at? From me, we changed that into reputation and relationships. And we worked during the recession on reputation and relationships. So every developer, every development entity, I went to the, all the business journals and looked, they have their list of the top 100 developers. I met with every single developer that would meet with me when there was nothing going on. And I would call them and say, I'd like to talk about redevelopment in Richfield. And they say, well, what is there to talk about? There's nothing going on. I said, that's why we want to talk, so that we understand what you want to do in the future. You understand what we want to do in the future. So when the time comes, we're ready to go. And so it's that downtime I'm more proud of than the development that's occurring now.
Thank you.
Councilmember Peterson.
Describe the efforts you would take to enhance redevelopment and/or residential growth in the city.
Well, it's got to be the right redevelopment and the right residential growth for North St. Paul. And that's going to look different than it's going to look in Oakdale. It's going to look different than it looks in Maplewood. And so a big part of that is understanding the community, understanding the comprehensive plan, understanding your downtown revitalization plan, understanding all those things to try to get an understanding of what North St. Paul wants to be. Again, going back to Richfield, when I first came there years ago, they talked constantly about comparatives, like, well, we want to be like Edina in this way, or we want to be like Bloomington in this way, and that's where this self-awareness piece comes back. No, let's talk about how we can be the best Richfield we can be, and that's really how I would approach it in North St. Paul. In Richfield, if you probably saw my cover letter, we were named the best suburb in 2019 by the City Pages, and I think it's because the community was able to define what they saw as being the best Richfield, not what they thought the best Edina might look like for Richfield.
Councilmember Thorson?
How would you reach or serve diverse groups or traditionally underserved populations within our community?
Yeah, this is a huge thing. For one thing, the community, all communities are changing. And so the diverse community is the future of the community. You know, the diversity is a part of the fabric of the community. And as a part of the fabric, you have to be able to appreciate kind of, you know, using the fabric analogy, the thread that they are, what they bring to the community, how they are woven into the tapestry of the community. You have to understand that, maybe I look at diversity very broadly. It certainly can be racial diversity. It could be age diversity. It could be diversity on a lot of different levels. And people communicate differently. And so it's trying to develop the relationships to understand what the communications needs are, to understand how people can best interact with the community. And I can't say, you know, for example, in Richfield, I think we have the largest Latino population in the metro. I can't come in and say, well, you know, I've read some articles, and this is how we really need to communicate with the Latino community. It goes back to relationships. What I need to do is develop relationships inside the Latino community so that they can tell me, they can be the leader on how to communicate, and I can empower people in the community to bring the message between City Hall and the residential community. Again, whether that's based on racial diversity, age diversity, income diversity, anything. So it's really about understanding and communicating in relationships.
Councilmember Cole?
Two-part question.
All right.
Describe your experience working collaboratively with other units of government or organizations. And the second part is describe how building these types of relationships benefited the community or organization you work for.
Well, we don't live in a vacuum. You can't succeed unless you have external relationships. My experience dealing with other units of government, I would go back to, you know, these large redevelopment projects for the Cedar area, which is next to the airport. I think we dealt with every level of government. We dealt with the Metropolitan Airports Commission, the FAA on airports issues. We got special legislation. I was the one at St. Paul sitting in front of, you know, legislative committees testifying about special legislation we needed because of the unusual impact of the airport on our community. We brought in a regional trail, so it was working with the Three Rivers Park District on bringing a trail to the community. You know how important a regional trail is to a community. That was something we didn't have and were able to bring about because of this redevelopment project. Working with, anything from sewer-controlled watershed districts. I worked with not only our local police, for example, in this area, we had homes that the HRA acquired for this redevelopment that were sitting there vacant. So we worked with our local police and local fire department and the state police on training in these homes. That's something that they're lacking, is a place to go into a structure and put off, flashbangs or whatever. So we're able to provide them with that. And again, I hate being repetitive, but it all comes back to relationships. And you don't want, when you need to go seek special legislation, you don't want that to be the first time you've spent a lot of time with your local legislators. You want them to, you want to have planted those seeds with them, that they know you, they know what your community is all about, they know what your needs are about. And so relationship building is a means unto itself, and it will always pay dividends. Anytime you make a relationship with another human being, it's always going to pay dividends.
Describe how you would become involved in the North St. Paul community.
Well, I would immerse myself. I'd become a member to the extent that they would have me in, the local business community. I would attend, I'm assuming you have Optimist clubs and all those service organizations. So it would be getting out into the community. As I said, well, I'm losing track now if I had this conversation with your staff or with you, but the reason I came into public work is I just love the relationship between people and place, and how people and place impact each other. And so drawing those connections between the people in North St. Paul and their physical environment and their government. So you would see me at the car cruise, you would see me at the parade, you would see me at the festivals, you would see me at the Chamber of Commerce or business organization meetings, you would see me out there in the community. You'd also see me out on occasion just chatting with folks in the park. I'm a super friendly guy. This is kind of a weird dynamic when you're sitting in a chair like this facing five folks. But if we were talking one-on-one, you would see I'm just a very friendly guy. And I'd be out in the community making friends.
Councilmember Wong.
Thank you, John. On question 12, provide an example of how you have been a change agent in your organization.
I think primarily through putting teams together that wouldn't normally be working together. I think one of my skills is when an issue comes up, maybe looking at it from a perspective other people hadn't thought of looking at it from. And so when you do that, it gives you insights into who to bring to the table. And so with our redevelopment projects, I've involved the police department in ways that people hadn't really thought to involve a police department. I've involved our fire department in ways that people hadn't thought to involve a fire department. Specifically with the police department, when we're doing multifamily housing, we talk to them about what's called crime prevention through environmental design, about architecture. How does architecture interact with police work? It's incredible, but it does. Where you put, how you have entryways, how you have landscaping, what a hallway looks like, what a vestibule looks like. All these things have public safety implications. And so by bringing, kind of a disparate group of people into discussing redevelopment projects, you find ways of making it better for the residents, for the community, in this case, the police officers. So it's bringing people together in that way.
Thank you.
In your current or previous role, what is the most difficult decision you have made, and how did you come to that decision?
Terminating employees is always difficult. I'm trying to think if that's the most difficult decision. COVID has been fraught with difficult decisions. In my department, I supervise building inspections, I supervise planning and zoning, I supervise housing, and economic development. And they all have very different job structures. And at the height of the pandemic, when we were at a stay-at-home order, our building inspectors were exempted from that. They had to be out inspecting construction. Construction in general was exempted. And so talking with employees about the different needs for each employee group, the different expectations, was very difficult. When you're telling an inspector, our expectation is that you're here 40 hours a week, that you're out going onto job sites, oftentimes with a lot of people, whereas somebody that's maybe doing a very different job, they can do their job at home. That was a very difficult decision to have, or discussion to have. The way I look at it is, in the end, when you have a discussion like that with people, you may disagree on the outcome, but you have to understand each other. And so when I explain this to our staff, if they're not understanding me, that's on me, and I need to continue to explain it, or maybe find a different way of explaining it. And so the goal is always that people understand the message. They may not agree with it.
Councilmember Thorson.
Describe a situation that you feel demonstrates your integrity and ethical standards.
And this is a small piece, I'll get back to a bigger piece. As I said, I manage, among other things, Section 8 housing in Richfield, and when I first came there, I don't remember the terminology that was used for the clients, because we've worked it out of the lexicon. The clients, the Section 8 clients, the voucher holders, when they would come in for meetings or to have some questions asked, the terminology that was used by staff about who they were, and like I said, it's to the point, it's been 14 years now that we've worked it out of, but I walked into the situation and I was like, no, these are human beings, and we're going to be respectful to them. They're residents of our community, regardless of whether they're a voucher holder of a Section 8 voucher or if they're, the most affluent person in the community. And so the terminology is client. We have Section 8 clients. That is uniformly used throughout the organization now. That's a very small example. We're faced with ethical dilemmas all the time. I'm trying to think of a great example for you, and let's see if we have some time at the end and we can come back to it.
Councilmember Cole.
If hired for this position and you're still in the same position 5 years from now, how do you think the organization will differ or be different?
It's hard for me to answer that because I don't know the organization. I don't know what it looks like now. My imprint on an organization in general, maybe I can talk about the way Richfield was different 5 years after I arrived there from when I came. And it was teamwork. It's all about teamwork. It was a very siloed organization. Even within the department, people weren't communicating with each other. And so I would say that people viewed their coworkers at all levels, from top to bottom, as a team member that had something meaningful to contribute. If that alone was my legacy after 5 years, I would be extremely happy. Based on my skill sets and my experience, I believe that the redevelopment and the development in the community will look very different. Every project has to be better than the previous project. Anytime I'm coming to you with a redevelopment project, we're going to ask ourselves, how is this better than the previous project we did? And if the answer is it's not, then we need to think long and hard about whether it's something we can be patient on and wait for something better. Everything has to progressively, especially in things like redevelopment, progressively build on itself, or you're not doing yourselves any favor. That's the reason why you're doing this. That's the reason you do redevelopment, is so that the next project can be better.
Thank you.
What have you done in your current position or previous positions that made a significant difference to the organization and for which you believe you will be remembered?
Well, first of all, I want to back up. Thank you for smiling at me. A smile is just a worldwide recognized gesture, so thanks for the smile. For Richfield, if you were to ask the people there, what my biggest contribution was in my entire tenure there, it would be the Best Buy corporate campus. We brought that in while I was there, 5,500 employees, 1.5 million square feet, a huge, huge boon to our economy. It's a TIF deal. Because of my expertise in tax increment financing and public financing, we were able to leverage a great deal of their tax increment. On the front end, we were supposed to be getting 15% of their TIF at the community level. Because it has appreciated so quickly in value, the increment that was going back to them to repay them, the increment that's being generated is triple what would normally go back to them. So just a huge amount of money coming into the community from that we've been able to leverage in so many ways, in our housing, in our development, and in the community. So I think if you were to ask people there what my greatest contribution was, they would say that. To me, my greatest contribution is, as I've been a leader there in the department, my former assistant director is now the community development director in St. Louis Park. And then I've got a couple of current people that work for me, an assistant director and a housing and redevelopment manager. To me, my greatest accomplishment is that I think that now any of those three could manage a project like Best Buy.
Thank you. Councilmember Wong.
Thank you. On question 17. During your short visit here and through your research of our community, what are you most excited about?
The people. I was just so pleasantly surprised by the housing stock and the way people keep up their homes. I'd been through North St. Paul, obviously, as somebody living in the metro. You come across every city from time to time. My greatest experience had been from the seat of my bicycle on the Gateway Trail, or waving hi to your snowman. So my wife and I came on Sunday. I spent about 4 or so hours in the community, driving around, walking around, and what really impressed me most was the housing stock and the pride that people take in their housing. And I'm excited about that pride that people have in their community.
Councilmember Peterson.
Why should North St. Paul, or why should the North St. Paul City Council select you for their next city manager?
Because I feel like I fill in some gaps. Anytime you're a member of a group, whether it's an organization, your family, whatever the group is, it's like a puzzle. And every puzzle piece has its little pieces that protrude, and they have their little pieces that indent. And I think that I have a lot of protrusions that really fit what you need. Your comprehensive plan, as I talked about, I have so many of the experiences that you're looking for there. when I've gone through your strategic plan, your downtown revitalization plan, the same thing. So I think I offer a lot of the things you're missing. I think a lot of the things that you have, and I know that a lot of your staff is new, your police chief is fairly new. Again, I'm not going to know more about policing than he is. My goal would be to help him be a better police chief and to work with him on being a better police chief. And I think you do that through relationships. You do that through so many things. But you've got those pieces in place. For somebody to come in from a planning background, from a way of looking at things that, like I said, a planning is a living document, it's a living process. We're always planning, we're always implementing, we're always improving, that I fill some gaps there. In terms of my needs, I came to this and because 3 years ago when our city manager had left, and I've lost track now if I shared that with you or with your staff, but my peers had asked me to apply for the job, and the fact that they put that kind of trust in me just provided me with tremendous pride. Since that time, I've mentioned I've been trying to ready myself for that. I've been very selective in the communities I've looked at. In the past 15 years, I've applied, I think, for 4 jobs. This is one of them. I'm going to be very selective. When I look at the community, what its needs are, as I said, I feel like I fit a lot of those needs. When I look at what my needs are, I feel like it fits a lot of those needs. The small town feel of it, Richfield, the tagline for Richfield is the urban hometown. I absolutely love that. Everybody wants to feel like they have a hometown, whether it's in the city of Minneapolis or in a small place. But I love that small town feel of North St. Paul, and I'd want to contribute to that.
Councilmember Thorson.
I guess I got the last question here. Most difficult one. Do you have any questions for us?
Well, so I think I've watched maybe 6 or 8 council meetings. I've talked about, I've reviewed all these plans. I've spent some time here. So I probably have about 100 questions for you, to be honest. But if I think about just a few, what are 1 or 2 of the most pressing issues that you think a new city manager will face here in their first, 6 months, year?
You answer it? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, we've been through a rough patch, and it's important that we get the right person in this job because our morale is so good, thanks to that man back there, Brian, our interim city manager. He's doing a heck of a job. And I don't not put any pressure on you, but I want to make sure our morale stays as high as it is because I've never seen it any higher, and I'm happy about that. Because if you don't have happy employees, the whole system, it's not going to be good. So I'm hoping that, you come with a lot of experience out at Richfield. I think Richfield and North St. Paul are pretty comparable in a lot of ways, and I like that feature. But I just think that we need to, we're going to be moving on. I just want to keep it solid and keep our employees happy because we've got a good group of, very, very committed employees.
And it shows.
And they deserve the best.
So I'll tell you this about myself. I'm a pretty thoughtful person. In my interview with your staff, I think I had 7 or 9 questions that afforded me a little bit of time. If I was on Jeopardy, the lightning round, I would not necessarily do great at. I'm a more thoughtful person. It's the final Jeopardy question where you have some time to think about it. And I think if you talk to your staff about my interactions with them in the tour and in my interview with them, I think it went very well. We connected very well. What I told them, they asked me what I saw as how I would like to deal with the staff in the in the coming year. And I told him, when I looked through all these city council meetings and minutes, I see a lot of changing names in the staff. And the number one thing I would want to work on with staff is for them to have a feeling of comfort, of stability, that maybe they haven't felt with a lot of the changes that have been happening. So I'm totally on the same page with you on that.
I would say, John, it's a great, question that Councilmember Peterson answered, but mine's also with that, but also with, we have about $100 million in projects going on right now. We're going through a renaissance. We haven't done this much development in a long, long time, and to keep that momentum going. So to me, it's keeping that momentum going, and, how would you be able to keep that going?
Yeah. And I hope my resume maybe describes it better than I have verbally. I am a leader in redevelopment. If you go out and talk to folks out in the community, talk to your peers that are, I welcome you to talk to the city council and the mayor of the city of Ridgefield, and they would tell you that particularly for redevelopment, that I'm very skilled, and it's the basis for that is not only my skill set, as we've talked about with public finance, but relationship building.
Good. Councilmember Thorson?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in my opinion, I think, we're an older city and we've got pretty aging infrastructure, and we developed a capital improvement plan that was long overdue back in 2012, and it's a long plan, and I would say we're still in the early stages of that, and I think that's something that's a main concern and should be a number one priority and focus. And also redevelopment, as the mayor said, in the last 2 years, we've had unprecedented amount of development happening all at once. And obviously, you've gone over your experiences with that. And along with that, one major, to me, component of that is Highway 36 and 120, and an interchange that's potentially going to go in on there, and how that's going to impact our community if it's not done right, and that we need to be strong advocates for what's best for North St. Paul with whatever ends up happening there. So that's just my kind of top three.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in terms of like physical, the physical plant, roads and infrastructure, you talked about that deteriorating, and I think that's hugely important. I think cities oftentimes have the tools to deal with those things. One of the things I would want to talk about in this community, and I certainly am no expert in North St. Paul, I know, but just kind of my first impression, I would be worried about the housing stock, about the same kinds of things you're worried about with the infrastructure, that people have the resources to keep revitalizing, keep investing in their housing stock, because that is the community, the housing stock out there, and making sure that the tools are there for your residents.
Okay. Any other questions for us?
What do you think I should be most excited about?
I think North St. Paul offers a lot of history. I think North St. Paul, like you say, relationships are, I think, very hometown feeling. I think it's a city that people feel home. I lived in St. Paul for a while, and it's big, and, you just don't have that small town feel that North St. Paul brings, that the history of it.
Some of us never leave.
Yeah.
A lot of them,
Stay for a year.
yeah. So we have a long history of people staying a long time, generations, which is kind of interesting for me.
Well, if I were lucky enough to get this position, it would be my hope to stay here a long time.
Good. Appreciate that. Okay. think that's it. All right.
Right.
Thank you, and good luck, and I wish, it's good. It was a good interview.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank all of you.
Thank you.
I don't want to say too much, you know.